The dust in the River Province archives had a different consistency to that of the imperial city. Here it was thick and damp, smelling of mildew and forgotten things. It settled on Lin Kui's robes and into the grooves of his aged abacus with a clinging finality. 5 years. 5 years since the Minister of Revenue had offered him up as a sacrificial lamb for a deficit not of his making. His crime was his integrity, a fatal flaw in the gilded cage of the court. Now he was a scribe, a curator of other people's mistakes. His world had shrunk to this single vaulted room and the endless river of tax logs that flowed across his desk. He found a perverse solace in the numbers. They did not lie. They did not scheme. They simply were. It was on a day thick with the scent of impending rain that he found it. The silk tax ledgers for the southern prefectures. He was cross-referencing bail counts against treasury intake, a tedious task for any mind less meticulous than his. His fingers, gnarled and stained with ink, danced over the abacus, the gentle clack-clack of the beads a familiar rhythm. The numbers sang their usual song of mundane commerce until he reached the quarterly report from the district of Shilling. A discrepancy. Minute. A variance of 0.47%. A number so trivial it would be dismissed as a rounding error, a scribe's tired miscalculation. But Lin Kui's mind, a weapon honed by decades of auditing the empire's soul, seized upon it. It was the pattern of the error. It wasn't random. It was a consistent, repeating fractional loss, hidden across hundreds of entries, like a single dissonant note played softly in a grand symphony. That night, the abacus beads glimmered in the lamplight as he worked. He requested older logs, then older still. The error was a seed planted years ago, and it had grown. He mapped it, not as a simple loss, but as a capillary system of tiny diversions, all flowing toward a single shadowy destination. A merchant consortium with opaque ownership. An entity that seemed to exist only to consume these microscopic slices of the empire's silk wealth. His heart, long dormant, began to beat with a dangerous, familiar thrum. This was no error. This was embezzlement on a staggering systemic scale. But it was more than that. Silk was currency, a backbone of imperial trade. By siphoning it so deliberately, someone was not just stealing wealth, they were introducing a subtle fragility into the entire economic structure, like termites quietly hollowing a great hall's main beam. He shared his nascent theory with Magistrate Wen, the province's aging administrator. Wen listened, his face a mask of weary prudence. "Lin Kui," he sighed, the words laced with a warning. "You see dragons in the mist. A 0.47% variance? I will not send a report to the capital based on the fantasies of a disgraced accountant and his beads. It would be my career. It would be your head." The refusal was a bucket of cold water, but it crystallized Lin Kui's understanding. Wen was not an enemy. He was a symptom. The system was designed to ignore such whispers, to prioritize stability over truth. The real architects of this scheme relied on that very inertia. Days later, a new face appeared in the archives. Prefect Gao, a junior official from the Imperial Censorate, ostensibly on a routine inspection tour. He was young, impeccably dressed, and carried an air of unearned authority. He took an unusual interest in Lin Kui's work. "The legendary Lin Kui," Gao said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "They still tell stories of your precision. It would be a shame if such talent were wasted chasing phantoms, or worse, if old discrepancies from your past were to be re-examined." The threat hung in the air, sharper than any sword. The game had begun. Lin Kui was the mouse, but he knew the labyrinth better than the cat. He continued his work in the open, feigning a return to mundane tasks. But in the dead of night, he worked on the true calculation. He wasn't just proving the theft anymore. He was building a model to predict its destabilizing point, the precise moment when the accumulated loss would trigger a cascade of trade failures. The climax came not with a sword fight, but with a delivery. A sealed scroll, borne by an imperial courier, arrived for Magistrate Wen. It was an edict from the Minister of Revenue himself, Lin Kui's old nemesis. It praised Wen's service and, citing a minor administrative need, ordered the immediate transfer of all original silk tax logs to the capital. It was the final move. The evidence was to be swallowed whole by the very beast that had created it. Lin Kui stood in Wen's office, the edict between them. The magistrate looked torn, relieved to be rid of the problem, yet uneasy. "They are cleansing the record," Lin Kui said, his voice quiet but firm. "Once those logs are gone, the thread is cut. The empire will not see the collapse coming until it is too late." "And what would you have me do?" Wen whispered, a desperate plea in his eyes. Lin Kui placed a single sheet of paper on the desk. It was not the thousands of pages of logs. It was one page, a single, elegant mathematical proof. It distilled the entire conspiracy into a sequence of irrefutable equations, culminating in a forecast. A liquidity crisis in the northern garrisons within 18 months, triggered by the artificial devaluation of silk. It was a language only a handful of men in the empire truly understood. He was one. The Minister of Revenue was another. "Do not send the logs," Lin Kui said. "Send this. To the office of the Chancellor, not the Ministry. Add your seal to mine." It was his death warrant or his redemption. To send it was to accuse the most powerful ministry in the empire of treason. Wen's hand trembled as he looked from the proof to Lin Kui's resolute face. He saw not a disgraced clerk, but the man he had once been, a man who believed in order. The resolution was not a triumphant return to the capital. There was no parade for Lin Kui. A month later, a terse communiqué arrived. The Minister of Revenue had retired due to sudden illness. The merchant consortium was quietly dissolved. The economic adjustments were made, invisible to all but the most astute. Lin Kui remained in the river province, the dust settling once more on his abacus. But the world outside his archive had shifted minutely on its axis. He would never be welcomed back. His name never cleared in the grand courts. But he had done the calculation, and he had chosen correctly. The empire, for all its corruption, would stand a while longer. And in the quiet, orderly columns of his ledgers, Lin Kui had found something he thought lost forever. Not his honor, but his purpose.